13-year-old Tommy surrendered for stealing bread, hoping for protection, but instead vanished from his cell along with other orphans. Marshal Blackwood and his deputy Wilkins were behind a monstrous conspiracy to sell children, condemning innocents to servitude. However, Teacher Hannah's desperate search for the truth led to a shocking discovery that changed everything. Uncover how one brave act exposed the town's dark secrets and brought long-awaited justice. When 13-year-old Tommy, with hollow cheeks and hungry eyes, entered the old brick sheriff's building, there was no fear in his gaze, nor even hope, only exhaustion. His fingers still remembered the rough crust of the stolen bread he had hidden under his torn shirt. The hunger was unbearable, and his younger siblings, orphans like him, waited in the cold alleyway. He knew it was wrong, but there was no other choice. He had come to surrender, hoping that jail, even for a couple of days, would free him from the agony of hunger and perhaps provide some food for those he had left behind. Sheriff Clayton, a short but broad-shouldered man with discerning eyes, looked up from his papers. "What do you want, boy?" he asked, his voice stern but not unkind. Tommy struggled to speak. I stole bread, sir, for my family. I came to turn myself in." Sheriff Clayton sighed, his gaze sweeping over the boy's emaciated frame. Just then, Deputy Wilkins, a man with cold eyes and an unpleasant smirk, emerged from behind the office door and immediately cast a disapproving look at Tommy. "Another street urchin, Sheriff? They multiply like rats," Wilkins sneered, clearly annoyed by the boy's presence. Sheriff Clayton merely scowled at him, but said nothing. He jotted Tommy's name in the ledger, then led him to a far cell where several other orphan boys, caught for minor offenses, were already sitting. "You'll stay here till morning. We'll see then," he said, locking the door. Tommy lay on the cold floor, feeling the pain of hunger give way to exhaustion. He believed that at least here he would be safe, and tomorrow perhaps an orphanage or work awaited them all. This was his only hope. However, an unsettling silence fell the next day. When Uncle Arthur, an old wanderer who often looked after Tommy and his family, brought a parcel and asked about the boy, Sheriff Clayton merely shrugged. "Don't know who you're talking about. No one like that was here. Must have had the wrong door," he replied dryly. Deputy Wilkins, standing nearby, smirked. "Or sober up, old man. This isn't a charity." Uncle Arthur, though old, wasn't deaf. He sensed something was wrong. Shock pierced him. He knew Tommy. He knew the boy had gone to surrender. Why wasn't he there? And why was Wilkins smirking so strangely? Uncle Arthur began to question other townspeople. No one had seen anything. No one knew anything. Fear hung in the air. Meanwhile, a few hours later, Hannah, a young but very principled and kind teacher from the local orphanage, came to the cell to visit her charges, the same orphans who had been with Tommy. She brought them books and food, trying to keep their spirits up. But the cells were empty. Hannah froze, her heart clenching with a terrible premonition. "Where are the children, Sheriff?" she asked Clayton, her voice trembling. Sheriff Clayton, visibly nervous, replied, They were released. Some distant relative picked them up. Last night." Wilkins, reappearing from behind the door, hastily added, "Yes, that happens. They get picked up, and that's it. They're vagrants after all." But Hannah saw how nervous Clayton was, how Wilkins was rubbing his hands. Anger began to boil within her. She knew these children. They had no distant relatives. It was a lie. And their pain, their disappearance, ignited her resolve. She knew something was wrong, and she wouldn't rest until she found the truth. Hannah began her own investigation. First, she went to Uncle Arthur, who told her his story about Tommy's disappearance and the marshal's strange behavior. Putting the pieces together, they realized it wasn't just a coincidence. The children couldn't simply vanish. Under the cloak of night, Hannah and Uncle Arthur began questioning people who lived near the sheriff's office. They found an old stable hand who, under the influence of whiskey, let slip that he had seen a group of children, including Tommy, being let out the back door of the sheriff's office that night. They were loaded into an unmarked wagon and driven east. The stable hand mentioned seeing Wilkins hand some papers to the man from the wagon, then rub his hands, mumbling about good profit. The shock of what she heard was incredible. The children had been sold, like merchandise. Deputy Wilkins was involved. But Sheriff Clayton, could he be part of this? Hannah, her anger escalating into scorching fury, decided to act. She needed to find out where the children had been taken. She remembered rumors of the Black Mines, remote, semi-legal coal mines beyond the mountains, where, it was said, people worked almost as slaves. Vagrants, prisoners, and those who needed to be forgotten were often sent there. It was hellish labor from which almost no one returned. Hannah knew she had only one chance. She had to get in there. It was madness. But the thought of the innocent children, especially Tommy, who had come to surrender hoping for protection, gave her no peace. With the help of Uncle Arthur, who knew the mountain trails, Hannah embarked on a dangerous journey. The path was long and grueling for her, but her determination grew with every step. They reached the mines. What Hannah saw there horrified her. Children, including Tommy, worked in the coal seams, their faces covered in soot, their eyes dull from exhaustion and fear. They were beaten, poorly fed, and literally enslaved. The overseers were brutal thugs, and the whole operation was run by Barrett, a ruthless and greedy man who, Hannah discovered, was in cahoots with Wilkins and possibly Sheriff Clayton himself. Seeing Tommy, his emaciated face, Hannah felt pain and anger merge into one. But alongside this burning feeling, hope dawned. Hope that she could save them all. She would do everything to make sure these children saw the light again. Hannah returned from the mines with irrefutable evidence. She secretly photographed the children in the mines, collected their testimonies of cruel treatment, and even found some papers linking Barrett to Deputy Wilkins through forged employment contracts. Her anger was righteous, but she understood that she had to act cleverly. Going directly to Sheriff Clayton would be suicide. She turned to Judge Mackenzie, known for her incorruptibility and harshness towards crime. Hannah laid out the entire story for her, showing her the photographs, the children's testimonies, and the documents. Judge Mackenzie, a woman with a cold, piercing gaze, was appalled. She was in shock at the scale of the inhumanity. "This is monstrous," she muttered, her face darkening with rage. She immediately contacted federal agents. The operation was conducted under the cover of night. Federal marshals, led by Judge Mackenzie, suddenly raided the mines. Barrett and his men were caught off guard. The children were freed. Tommy, seeing Hannah, rushed to her, his eyes full of tears of relief. Then the Rangers stormed the town. Deputy Wilkins, caught red-handed at his workplace, could offer no resistance. He tried to accuse Sheriff Clayton, claiming he was in on it, but there was no proof. However, when Sheriff Clayton was interrogated, he broke. He confessed that Wilkins had been blackmailing him, threatening to expose old compromising information. Clayton knew about the dealings but turned a blind eye, hoping it wouldn't affect him. He was guilty of complicity and abuse of power. The trial of Wilkins, Barrett, and Clayton became a sensation. Tommy and the other children testified. Their words, despite their fear, were filled with such pain that they shook the entire court. Irrefutable evidence was presented, including Wilkins's financial manipulations and his connection to Barrett. The verdict was harsh. Wilkins and Barrett received life sentences for kidnapping, slavery, and child abuse. Sheriff Clayton received a long sentence for complicity and abuse of power. The triumph was complete. All the children were freed and placed in Hannah's orphanage, where they received care and help to recover. Tommy, though he had endured terrible things, now found a true family and hope for the future. There was no more hunger in his eyes, only light. The town slowly began to heal. Hannah became a hero. Her story inspired many to fight for justice and protect the innocent. And the story of the boy who came to surrender for bread and instead uncovered a sinister conspiracy and freed dozens of lives became a legend, passed down by word of mouth, reminding everyone that true courage can shine even in the youngest of hearts.